everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on Laid Back the Zinga podcast. And our topic for this week is Thinking Bigger, Unlocking the Mindset for Innovation and Growth. Our guest for this week is Felix Riley. Felix is a professional speaker and a business strategist. Felix helps organizations think beyond what feels safe and helps them aim for what feels ambitious. Hello, Felix. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. But I know you're a professional speaker, but is this your first time on a podcast?
No, I've done quite a few.
All right, but this is your first time on our own podcast then.
Yeah. Brace yourself. I'm about to flood the airwaves.
Fair enough. But what's your expectation for today then?
I think flattery.
Yeah.
I'll take 30 minutes. Hopefully you'll pick my brains, and I'll want to pick your brains, and we can just see where we get to with our mutual views on thinking bigger, maybe.
Fair enough. So that you've mentioned thinking bigger. So when we say, or we hear people say, think bigger, what does it actually mean, and what do people actually misunderstand by it when they hear that thinking bigger? What does it mean, and why does it lead to a lot of misunderstandings as well?
Yeah, it's my obsession. Just to be absolutely clear, it's my obsession.
Yeah.
Because I have worked in quite a few number of fields in my life. I started as a comedy writer. I used to be very funny. And then I went into the city, which was much easier than comedy writing. Sorry, anyone in the city. Then I left to start my own company, sold it back to a city institution, sat on the global executive of a New York Stock Exchange listed company, went to Zambia to do copper mining, which was the most fascinating adventure of my life. I was negotiating with President Banda one day personally, and then I was negotiating with untold amounts of tribal chiefs who were just such a broad cross-section, amazing people. And then I wrote a couple of thrillers for Penguin. And then I turned a friend's big IT company around. And that's when I became a business strategist, because they said, can you stay on as an advisor? And then I just started advising companies, everything from turnaround to growth and all that. But what I became obsessed by was I was dealing with university smart people, really clever people, who thought really small, who were really conservative. And I became incredibly frustrated, thinking, but hang on, this isn't intelligence related. This is obviously psychology. What's going on? And I realized in all these areas of life that I'm dealing with, I was encountering limited thinking, where people have limited beliefs. And these are brought about by experience.
Yeah.
I realized it was cognitive biases. So things like learned helplessness, where we have so many setbacks, we hear the word no, we get so many rejections so often that we kind of give up. We don't stand up one day and say, I give up. We just quietly give up, T.S. Eliot's, Lives of Quiet Desperation. And then I also saw I think probably the most common one is risk aversion. Yeah. People are incredibly risk averse. Up to 90% of our decisions are fear based. Now, some of that's quite good. Don't run across a busy road.
Yeah.
But it's incredible how often I encounter that. And you get status quo bias. So many people talk about wanting to change, but really, really want to hold on to what they know. Confirmation bias. People want to be agreed with and don't want to deal with challenging beliefs and all these things. Anyway, and I was seeing this, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And now when I'm in meetings, it's like I have sounds popping in my head when I see a cognitive bias. And I thought to myself, well, it's my job to fix this, And I went away and researched it and looked at my life and thought of the people I know who think really big. And I realized that the way for people to think bigger was to be creative, innovative. Ken Robinson, the great TED talker, he had a wonderful definition where he said, creativity is having original ideas that have value.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's a great definition. So I'm saying to people, I'm not talking about art. Art is a subsection of creativity. Business people are some of the most creative people I've ever met. And so I realized that in a funny sort of way, if you just say conversationally, it's very interesting. On a podcast, we can really get into it. But in business meetings, I was struggling to get it across because it's not the right forum for me to set out a thesis and an antithesis and all these things. So I started going into public speaking because I wanted to spread the message. And I can't tell you how passionate I'm about this. And I'm very privileged. I've given talks at hospitals, law firms. I've worked with the military. I've managed global management consultancies, global charities. The message resonates because everybody wants better ideas and everybody wants their team to think better. They really do. Because if your team was firing on all cylinders, think what they could do. The amount of bosses who look around the room going, my Lord, half the people are switched off, And people don't want to be switched off. That's a really sad outcome of cognitive biases. So so that's it. So that's where the thinking bigger to me is unleashing your potential. It's really realizing the opportunity that is in front of you. I don't care if you're a sports person. I don't care if you're an entrepreneur. I don't care if you're a charity worker. You know, there's so much more we can do, and I just love it. I love giving the talks. I love giving the workshops.
Yeah.
And the talk's called the Flea Jar, by the way.
I do agree with that, right? You did mention that you actually engage with really smart people, and you realized they were taking really small, and that actually confused you. Then you understood it's not about intelligence, so it could be about the mindset. So that leads me to my next question, right? Do you think, since you realize it's not about intelligence, because these people you met, they're actually smart, but you don't understand why they're thinking so small. So
Yeah.
do you think it's about perspective or ambition? So because, for example, if the person has not been exposed to a lot of things, so it depends on what they can actually see, their own perspective. So do you think it's about perspective or ambition? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important point. I mean, I think being exposed to different mindsets, different worldviews is absolutely crucial. You know, if I think of, I give lots of talks at schools, and it's really striking how, you know, privileged kids, which is great. I don't mind. You know, I'm not. Yeah, good for them. Good for them. They're surrounded by successful people. They're surrounded by people who say, "Look, the world's your oyster. You can do anything you want." You know, and they think big already. You know, they just need to sort of give it some aim. But other kids in poor areas grow up, and I grew up in a council estate. You know, poorer kids have very low expectations, and they don't naturally think big because the messaging around them, all subconscious. No one's, you know, being a pain in the backside and depressing and saying you've got no future, but the subconscious drumbeat of their lives is, you know, this is where you live, this is where you'll stay, this is how your life's going to be, you know, and they don't see much, and so your mind doesn't, you know, your eyes don't look up, they don't lift up, and I think that's when, you know, I get really excited about communicating my message, because I want anyone can do this. You know, if I'm with, you know, a bunch of inner city kids, or, you know, or with a, you know, with a company that has really struggled to, you know, get out of a trough, never get up to the next level, and they've kind of given up and they didn't think it was possible. I get so excited when we can have a brainstorm where their ideas start to bubble up. You know, I mean, I have ideas all the time. I'm an ideas machine, but the most exciting ideas are the ones my clients give me, because they're in the situation. They've got the depth of knowledge about their situation I can't possibly have. And so that's, yeah. So I think that perspective is really, really important. I think it's a really important point. You know, and of course what I'm doing is giving people a different perspective. That's my entire goal, is to give people a different perspective. So perspective reframing is absolutely everything.
Yeah. I do agree with that. I'm a scientist, and I think sometimes it's about perspective sometimes, because you see a scientist, when you try to explain, oh, you can actually take your research out of the lab and actually turn into a commercial business. So most people can't see it because it's all about perspective, and you keep on explaining, you get frustrated because they can't see what you see. It's hard for them to
Yeah.
actually make sense of what you're trying to say. So, do you think thinking bigger is a skill that can actually be developed, or do you think it's traits that somebody actually is born with? So it's easy for the person to assimilate change and actually start thinking bigger. Or do you think it's a skill that someone can actually develop?
I think it's a skill that gets knocked out of us.
Knocked
I
out.
mean it. You look at a child,
Yeah.
you know, a child picks up a car, it suddenly is a spaceship. You know, you see your daughter running around the garden with her arms out, she is an aeroplane.
Yeah.
We think to the stars and back when we're children, but education knocks it out of us, because
Really?
education we're wrong. You know, and it take, you know how narrow education is. It's shocking. I mean, education came about. Do you know why public schools came about in the
No.
UK?
No.
This is a fact. They didn't come about because they thought, you know what, everyone deserves an education. Not at all. Education was for the privileged, for royalty and aristocracy and very, very wealthy people. So Oxford University, Cambridge, and all that malarkey. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, and the problem was the oiks, the peasants, couldn't count to 10. So when the people with the factories wanted them to like put 12, you know, bales of cotton or whatever it is, you know, in that machine, they didn't know how to count to that number. They didn't know how to read the writing on the side of the machine to know where to put the lever and all these things.
Yeah.
And they realized, well, we need to educate the people.
Yeah.
But when they educate them so that they could work in factories. They didn't educate them to realise their
To
potential.
take over the world.
Yeah. And if you track education in the UK, it has always been about delivering workers, just worker ants out into the bloody system. And we're lucky that, a sort of certain cream sort of, rise to the top and have, original ideas and become entrepreneurs and scientists and all these things. But actually, we don't, education is not about realizing people's potential. It's about bottling it and shoving it down a ruddy, narrow gully. And then we're surprised when we aren't the most innovative country in the world. We could be, if we had the guts to just teach people for the bloody sake of it. I don't. Obviously, I've got a soapbox here. I get enraged at the fact that people's thinking gets knocked down as a process of their education, and as well as I, and as the listeners will know, the amount of times you are sitting in a room with a friend who's got no so-called qualifications, and you're thinking, I'm talking to one of the smartest people I know. So my three brothers are all firemen. So, academically, I'm by far and away the most successful. But they're easily as clever as me. Easily. But the system didn't recognise that. But I don't sit in that room thinking, oh, I'm the cleverest. I don't. I think, wow, the system works for me the best. I've got two daughters. One's doing astrophysics, and the other one's off travelling around Central America as a social media manager. And I'm like, well, so which one does the system think is the cleverest?
Yeah.
Obviously, the astrophysicist. She is, by the way. But we don't. So, but my point being, so it's a very long-winded way of saying yes. It can absolutely be retaught. I would say retaught. I can, look at you. Look, you're a scientist.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of your heroes, I'm hoping, is Richard Feynman. Yeah, you're the great Nobel Prize-winning physicist. Who I think is such a great inspiration in terms of education, what have you. He gave that great line. He said, if you can't explain your ideas to an 8-year-old, you don't understand them.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's a really good rule for scientists, especially. But when he was a physicist, he thought, I need to know more. So he just started going on doing different degrees and things. He did a degree in biology. He'd go to art classes because he thought, I just need to know more. And that what he was doing was he was getting back to what he already knew, but had lost sight of, because he knew that going just down the physics road was going to be restrictive. Was actually going to be, yes, you get the depth of knowledge, but you can get blinkered. And I think he was a genius, well, in the absolute sense. But he was just a brilliant guide for how we should all behave.
Yeah. What you just said, you said education actually boxes a lot of people in, because the main aim of why they actually started education was to actually help people, the peasants, actually become workers. And that will lead me to my next question, because it's similar. So do you think, not just the UK in general, but looking at the world at large, so do you think your environment actually shapes how big you allow yourself to think then?
Sorry, reframe that. Say that again.
So I said, do you think, now looking at the world at large, not just the UK, do you think the environment you find yourself in actually limits or shape how big you allow yourself to think?
Sorry. Yeah, I was wrong-footed by you taking it global. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you grow up in modern Europe, then you've seen that. If you take someone in a very humble village in India, for example, very humble, with a very humble life, why should they be thinking about quantum mechanics? Why should they be, in their minds inventing, the next computer chip? That's why representation on film is so important. When you get the multiracial Jane Austen productions, there were no black characters in any Jane Austen novels. There were no Asian characters, but quite rightly, we're making multiracial versions now because there's 15 white versions if you need a white version, fine, and there's some of them very good. But also, people need to see themselves on TV. You see, a friend of mine sent me a really beautiful picture recently where it was a disabled girl, and it was on Twitter or something. But it was a disabled girl in a big supermarket, and the poster had a disabled girl, and she was pointing at this girl in a wheelchair, and she was in a wheelchair. And just her face was just beaming, because we need to see. But what happens is that very act of seeing yourself represented, beyond yourself, lifts the ceiling. So when you get, proper representation on television, for example, which is obviously crucial because that's such a big medium, but such a big impact on our lives, it says kids, when you see when a child sort of sees, the American, well, I mean, Barack Obama becoming president, I mean, that changed everything. That blew the ceiling off. It said it wasn't just a white man's job anymore, you know? And I don't mean to be wildly politically correct. But this is just fact. This is, when, the environment you grow up in gives you all these representations of what's possible and what you're capable of doing,
Yeah.
and this is the thing. And I think it's incredibly important. And I think, Britain social mobility has collapsed in Britain, absolutely collapsed. Used to be pretty good, and now it's collapsed. And I think, for me, actually, funnily enough, I think social mobility is my number one. I think it is my number one factor in what I think of an economy. And there aren't, Scandinavia is very good. Europe's okay. Obviously, America's dreadful. But and obviously lots of countries around the world aren't good. But I think it's such an important measure. And if it were me, every single law that was put through Parliament would have to go through the social mobility lens and say, how does it help people to move up the social ladder? Sorry, long-winded way of saying, yes, I think the environment is huge because it shows you the art of the possible.
Yeah.
And then when we get these amazing, if you get a disabled person going into space, that's important because it says that every disabled person, don't limit your dreams. You can do this sort of thing. So yeah, I think environment's massive.
Yeah. Okay. But I'll take you back to what you said about education, how education beats stops people from actually thinking big. All right. So apart from the education system, all right, linking it to different industries out there, do you think there are certain industries out there that unintentionally actually suppress people from actually thinking big? Unintentionally.
Yeah, I think I think I think a lot of industries don't want you to think big. You look at marketing, they want you to think big. They want you to go crazy, and that's lovely, and people with that kind of mindset should gravitate towards these sorts of things. But I think a lot of companies just want drones. They don't really want you to question. A lot of banks and a lot of city firms aren't looking for you to be sitting there being super wild and imaginative. But I think that said, you'd have to be a pretty stupid company
Yeah.
or sector to not have a young person come up and she says, I've had this idea of how we could run this process, and I think it'd be better, and go, no, love, we don't want new ideas here. You'd listen because you go, well, that's $1 million idea, So I think you're gonna. I don't think there's a sector. I think there's some people. I mean, take the military. I think they're the most open-minded people you'll ever meet. Now, think about that. We think of the military as rigid, military thinking, everything's got to be. No, they're not. They're amazing. They're absolutely amazing because they know that ideas are life and death. They know that a good idea could transform how we go into battle. And of course, the world is in flux. We've been at war with Russia since 2014. It just has since they invaded Crimea. We have had a low-level war with the West has had a low-level war with Russia, and now you've got Trump looking to invade or take Greenland. You've got every country in Europe and Canada are now running military drills and exercises and brainstorms about what do we do if we have to take on America. So I find the military to be incredibly open-minded. I think. I tell you what. Let me tell you where it's really heartbreaking, and that is when I go to hospitals. I give quite a few talks at hospitals, and that's a classic example. So government departments are very, very slow-moving machines. They are very constricted. They
suppress ideas.
Yeah, they do, and a lot of them don't want to hear them. And if you have it, good luck turning the ship around. Because every department is a massive oil tanker, and it's really interesting. And I go into, I go to different ministries and give talks, and everyone gets excited. And then at the end, it's the same every time. They go, "But how will we ever get these ideas through?" And I think that is such a loss for. Obviously, I can only speak to the UK government at the moment, but it's such a loss because if we could introduce a nimbleness, an ability to spin up idea labs, side projects where to prove concepts and see what we think, I think it could be it would accelerate the effectiveness of government so much. I mean, I'm a huge fan of government. I think it's I'm not someone who wants to rail against it, but I think there's a shocking amount of it's not so much waste as wasted opportunity, and I think that environment is very, very tough because it's institutionally sclerotic. The arteries are thick.
Mhm. Okay. But I'm going to take you back again to what you said about smart people. You'd mentioned that you met a lot of smart people and you realize they don't think big. And you started thinking, asking yourself, why? These guys are smart. Why are they thinking like this? So, why do you think smart people often struggle to think beyond the existing systems?
I think the problem with being smart is you're clever, and that's quite dangerous because then you think you're right. And
Yeah.
I don't think I'm right. I think I've got best guesses. I have to be open to the possibility that I'm wrong about everything. Love's good. I think love's good. Hate's bad. I think there's some absolutes that you can sort of say, well, there's nothing good there. But honestly, in terms, most of life is quite nuanced. And I think honestly, when you're clever, you get quite pleased with yourself. You sort of get used to being right, and that's very dangerous. And I say this, I go to lots of law firms, who are wonderful, brilliant people, and I say you've got to watch yourselves because you're clever. And the problem is, so fact. This is a fact. The smarter you are, the more liable you are to suffer from cognitive biases
Yeah.
because you're right all the time. And I read so widely that I feel humble all the time. I just think, wow, that's amazing. Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's great. And I think if you expose yourself to new ideas, it keeps you very humble because you think, well, there's so much to learn. There's just, Socrates said, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. And I think that's the beginning of learning, actually. And and if I think of when I'm with my brothers who are bloody smart firemen, they're not arrogant about their knowledge at all. They're the greediest people I know. They're like, tell me about this. What do you think of this? Da, da, da. All these ideas. And when I meet people who are greedy for knowledge, I get really excited because I think, oh, you're fine. You're fine. You really want to learn and up your game. When I meet people who aren't curious, I'm very nervous straight away because I think, well, not nervous, but I'm very wary. I think, okay, you're tricky because if you're not curious, you probably think you know everything because you're not curious about what you don't know. I think you're a scientist, so scientists are fascinating, and I wish more people had the scientific mindset because scientists, if everything you did went right, you'd have to look around and go, hang on, what? Every experiment, everything I've done just works out right. That doesn't make any sense. You're meant, that you're going to get it wrong, and I think that's really healthy because you're looking for it's that feedback loop, isn't it? Okay, that didn't work. Let's go that way. Okay, part of that worked. Let's go down. And so intellectually, I think scientists are probably in a pretty good place actually because they're used to getting it wrong. They're used to they're because you wouldn't waste your time. Scientists wouldn't do an experiment where they know 100 times it's going to go wrong. They're trying to break that pattern.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very healthy mindset. So I suspect that leads to curiosity. I can't speak to all scientists, but yeah.
Yeah. What you just mentioned, I don't know if you can see my shirt. My shirt
I
says
can't. What, show me?
Curiosity over chaos.
Oh, yeah.
What you just said. Because I don't like arguments. I say that all the time. I don't think argument actually helps anybody. If you want to
Yeah.
learn, argument is the wrongest way to go about it. You can be curious and you can actually exchange ideas and learn. But arguments, I don't think you learn anything. So,
Yeah.
and it took me to have this mindset shift to realize I cannot impact anybody or influence anybody through arguments. All right, and
Yeah.
that's why I kept on saying argument is useless. It's better for
Mm.
you to be curious over chaos and remove arguments. So, what mindset shift do you think these smart people you just mentioned, right? Because you mentioned cognitive bias. So, what mindset shift do you think usually has the biggest impact on innovation for them to change, change the way they think, and then think bigger, and then so they can actually have an impact for them to be creative and then go on to innovate a lot of things.
I think it's exposing yourself to other ideas. I think like they say travel broadens the mind. And I think the thing about travel, I think what we don't articulate is that travel makes you realize that you're living one version of reality. You're living in, say, the UK, and then you go to Zambia, you go to India, and you go, wow, I'm just this random what I'm living. It's not the only way to live. I think travel. I would wish travel on everybody. I wish the poorest kids in Britain were taken to India and taken to Southeast Asia and what have you, because you can't see the world the same ever again, and you realise that anything's possible, and that we shouldn't stay stuck in a rut of thinking, oh, United Kingdom is the only way to think and all that. You end up as a reform voter. Keep doing that. He said getting political, but I think being exposed to different ideas and different people is absolutely crucial to constantly stimulate yourself. I have 4 things that I teach people to become creative, and just to rattle through them. One is accept failure, embrace failure, because you're going to fail. But that means if you're willing to embrace failure, you stop thinking you're right all the time. You're open to mistakes. You're trying. You're getting inside your safety zone. You're curious. Secondly, I say you've got to embrace different perspectives. Take other ideas, to listen to other ideas. The most successful people surrounded themselves. Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, all these people surrounded themselves with lots of different thinkers, and they were, magpies, nicking the best ideas, getting stimulated. And then the third thing is the reality. It takes work. You have to commit to it. You can't just sit there and you're accidentally going to become more curious and more intelligent. You got to put the work in. Read books, go to galleries, go to museums. And then the fourth thing is embrace your inner child. Be playful. And that's it's the most important step. You've got to be playful. And I think and so I would say to smart people, look, get out there, go and do things that are antithetical to the way you live and think. If you love to go to very posh plays down the West End, which is lovely, I love all that, and that's lovely. Go to a community theatre in Hackney. Go to a community theatre in South East London and see what they're doing. Go and watch some political thing, or even if it disagrees with your politics, you think, be exposed, expose yourself to different ideas. I look at the right wing media occasionally. I look at Fox News. Not because I'm going to agree with it, but I need to know what's going on. I need to understand how other people think, and I have to do that, and we should all do that. I'm not saying we need to agree, and we shouldn't over-emphasize with nasty ideas, but yeah, I think you've got to get yourself out of your comfort zone. That's it. Get out of your comfort zone. Go and do things that are antithetical to the way you live and think.
BetterHelp is the paid partner of this episode. Growing up in Nigeria, mental health was not discussed in our homes. As a man, you are discouraged from showing your emotions, as this is seen as a sign of weakness. If this resonates with you, you are not alone. About 62% of adults believe that societal attitudes stop them from seeking mental health support when they need one. And that's why I've teamed up with BetterHelp to stop the stigma around mental health and encourage you to seek mental health support from credentialed therapists when you need one. These credentialed therapists listen, ask questions, and help you to see things from new perspectives in order to improve your life. BetterHelp is on a mission to help you start therapy as easy as possible. If this is something you're interested in, click on the link below or go to betterhelp.com/laidback to match with a credentialed therapist in as little as a couple of days. You can also get 10% off your first month by using my link or the code laidback. Yeah. So, but do you think you mentioned about being open-minded, trying as much as possible to listen to other ideas because you're not always right, and being playful, acting like a child because you have to be playful to actually come up with a lot of ideas. So, in people who are actually trying as much the way, okay, let's take it back to how you actually train people when you talk about thinking big. Do you think mentors or their peers or friends, do you think they can play a role in expanding or shrinking or the way we think? Do you think they can actually help us to expand our thinking or help us to shrink it even further? what do you think? What role do you think mentors and our friends and peers and families play in this?
The single best thing, if you said to me, Felix, what's most explained your success in life, if you want a better word, I had a mentor when I was younger. It changed the game. I was on a council estate, and expectations were very, very low for our lives. People around me were going to prison. People were going. It was not the most pleasant place. And I had a mentor, retired civil servant, and he was actually a member of the Communist Party. But he said, "I don't care what your politics are, but you've got to be able to back them up. You've got to be able to justify them." And I loved him for that. He changed my life because he beat the intellectual so and so out of me. He raised my game and told me to think bigger and get to university, get the best degree you can, go and live a full life. I think mentors, I don't think they're just a good idea. I'm shocked that the government hasn't mandated it. I'm shocked that the government doesn't say, look, we need to have a program where children, especially from the inner cities and what have you, are paired with, say, a banker or a doctor, or a scientist, someone who can, because what a mentor does is, apart from instilling a bit of discipline, they show you an alternative
What's
reality.
possible? Yeah.
Yeah. Mentors I can't overstate. It changed my life. It's maybe I would have had exactly the same life without it. You never know. It's not an experiment that I can have two of. But yeah, I think they're beyond vital, and it breaks my heart that it's not mandated as a absolutely compulsory thing. I think it would be a game changer. But again, it goes back to the fact that the education system is not to educate you. The education system is there to make you fit to work in the factories and the offices of the powers that be, and which is ridiculous because it makes the country poorer, it makes us poorer. It's a false economy. Even if you're greedy, change the system. If you're socially minded, change the system.
Okay, but assuming you've managed to actually change the way someone thinks, and the person is now thinking bigger, now they think bigger, but it's not all about our implementation, because it's easy to think, we come up with ideas, but you have to take actionable steps, all right, to make it to implement the idea, make it workable. So how do you think you can actually make somebody who, you've already managed to make the person start thinking bigger, how do you think you can actually do to help the person to also know that they now need to take this next step into implementation? And why do you think big ideas actually fail at the implementation stage?
I think there's a really good book called How to Get Big Things Done. It's a really good book, and it talks about the moving parts that can all fall apart. And basically, it's the planning. If you plan it enough, it should be okay. If you've got the right things in place. I think a lot of things go wrong because we implement them without enough foresight, and then when the rubber hits the road, things start to go wrong. We haven't thought it through well enough. I think you're absolutely right. Listen, despite my obsession, my mission to get people to think bigger, it's all about implementation. Thinking is, it's like having all the ingredients on the kitchen table. Well, the point is to make a meal, but get the right ingredients, you're going to make a better meal, And so, and that is, well, that's a question of, really, if you want to get really down to it, it's incentives. Seriously, we are an incentive-driven animal. As an animal, we're either running away or running towards. That's the human condition. And so, so what we need to do is we need to say, right, okay, what are the incentives for implementing this? Is it you might make money, you might discover a cure for something, you might, if people should feel motivated enough, they should want to go towards it. And again, if I'm with a group of people where I'm about to do a brainstorm and I think, I don't think you're going to implement it, I'll stop and say, right, before we do this, are you going to implement it? Or is it a talking shop? Is it, we just sort of trying to sort of whistle in the dark here? And so it is about making sure the mindset is right before you have the brainstorm. Thinking bigger actually can make you want to do stuff, which is lovely. So I don't want to get too clever about the cart and the horse, but it's when I give talks, I often go back 3 months and 6 months later to say, okay, what happened? Because we had that talk, we had the workshop. Now what? And they really appreciate that because they go, we do need to be held accountable. Because life is so busy, it's very easy to have a brilliant idea and it doesn't get implemented. So most people say, yeah, come back in 3 months and come back in 6 months because we do want you to see what happened and then talk about things if we didn't do it and help us to understand why we didn't do it. It's a question of will. It is a question of someone grabbing the situation by the horns and really well driving it through, isn't it?
Mm. So, since you try as much as possible to hold them accountable, to make sure they take this implementable, take the next step to take action on their ideas, I've been in a situation where people tell you, "Oh, I have this great idea, but it's going to cost me like £1 million to achieve it." And the more you talk to them, they keep on giving the excuse that without money you can't actually start a business or do anything. So they keep talking about big, big, big. So do you think starting small is a contradiction to thinking big, or do you think it's a requirement? Because how can you get to 1 million if you've not started?
Well, I think it's an absolute prerequisite. Absolutely. We have to be realistic. If I say to you, give me £1 million, I want to start a business. And you say, well, what's it going to do? I say, well, it might break even every year. And you say, well, I'll never get my money back. Now, if I say to you, I think you could make 10 million in 3 years, 5 years, you go, oh, that's interesting. Show me. Talk me through that. And if at the end of that talk you go, oh, nothing comes with guarantees, but that looks pretty compelling. And I like you, Felix. I back you. I think you're going to walk through walls. I think you're going to walk through fire. And I like your team. And I think you've read the market right. I think you've got a new opportunity. I think you're solving a problem. Crucially, if you're not solving a problem, what are you doing? So if you're solving a problem, that means there's a demand out there.
Yeah.
I'll back you. I mean, when people don't get back, they don't get back. People don't get back for a reason. Now, don't get me wrong. If a kid from a privileged family, Jeff Bezos got lots of money from his family to start Amazon. Bill Gates' mum was on the board of IBM. You know what I mean? And he got an IBM contract. I mean, there are people in the world who've had a very good start in life.
Yeah.
If I could wave a magic wand, people from lower incomes, from if you're in the cities and what have you, we need to find a way. Going back to my point about social mobility, we need to find a way for them to be able to get their ideas out there. To be able, we need forums where they can pitch, and when they don't get it, they then get taken to the next phase, which is right. We're going to teach you why you didn't get it, and it's up to you if with the new knowledge, if you want to come back and try and pitch again or work on your idea. That's an inherent unfairness in society. And again, Labour, Conservatives, they're all idiots to not realise we are missing out on billions of national income by not getting these kids with great ideas a platform to explore them, and what have you. So you have to convince people. And the thing as well is, if I can convince, if I sit there and I say, look, give me £1 million, I've got this idea, and I can't convince you, at a subconscious level, at the very least, or maybe a conscious level, you're going to think, do you know what? If Felix can't convince me, how's he going to convince the market?
Exactly.
How's he going to convince everyone else? So the art of persuasion is incredibly important. That ability to charm a room, that ability to win people over, is crucial. So in a funny sort of way, it's self-selecting. It is self-selecting. And that's the thing, isn't it? When we sort of go to fix problems, I think governments, because again they are blunt instruments so often. They'll try this initiative. We'll give everyone £2,000, to start a new business. And you go, that's great. What do they really need? What they really need is a mentor to teach them how to pitch. Because if you give me a choice between £2,000 or the opportunity to pitch to 10 billionaires, well, I'll take the opportunity to pitch to 10 billionaires. We've got to keep it with the right leg up. Got to give them the right leg up.
Okay. So, but you did mention how we need to actually provide a platform for this case with great ideas. All right. I've also seen people who, because of things they've passed through, the pain and the rest of it, they end up finding their purpose in life. All right. So, do you think, or what role do you think failure plays in expanding the way we think? Because these people, they've been through a lot, so the pain actually made them to realize, oh, this is my purpose. Now I want to do this for the rest of my life. So what role do you think failure actually plays in helping us to actually think big?
What role does fear play?
Failure.
Oh, failure. Sorry, failure. Yeah. Oh gosh, I love failure. I mean, it's funny. I give a talk called "Failing Upwards," and it's and the very title suggests that we fail upwards. If you watch Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan playing basketball, they missed so many game-winning shots. They missed thousands of shots. But that's how you succeed. If I've got a guitar there, if I, to be able to play a tune, you have to fail a lot, and then you can play it. And if I want to go beyond strumming, chord playing, to proper picking, well, that's more failure while I learn. And we give the wrong messaging around failure. I don't want to be one of those people who says every kid could be a millionaire, every kid could be an entrepreneur. That's a sick message. But what we need to say to people is life is a series of failures, and then we have and then we step up with a success. Then we fail some more, then we step up with a success. We've got to normalize it and habituate it and make people realize it's okay. And I think, and the crucial thing, I think one of the things that, I think if I've got one defining aspect of my intelligence, I think it's that I spend a lot of time learning from my failures. I really do. I don't fail and move on. I fail and stop and go, right, what did I do wrong there? There's a great thing with Kobe Bryant where he missed a really important shot in a game, and he missed another really important shot in the game. And he was sitting by the side of the court, and he had his head in his hands. And afterwards, the interviewer said to him, "Look, I could see you were really upset by missing those shots." And Kobe Bryant said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, you had your head in your hands. We could see you upset." He goes, "No, I was thinking, what did I do wrong? What do I have to do to fix it next time?" And I figured it out, and it was fine. And we don't do enough of that. So often failure, kids, are almost allowed or taught to just throw their toys out the pram and, lost the race or whatever, whatever it is. Instead of going, well, stop, what did we learn? What did we learn? How do we not do that next time? Because if you don't do it next time, you fail in a different way. But then you don't do that next time, you fail in a different way. And before you know it, you're running out of failures. And you're like, oh, there's success there. I've given, when I started out giving public talks, I messed up a couple of times. I was a bit cocky. I thought, I've got this. I know, just stay out and wing it. You can see me, like I can talk forever. And I thought, well, I'll be fine. And then I realized, no, I need to sweat it. I need to learn it like nothing else in the world. I owe people the best possible talk, the best possible performance. And I learned that through failure. And I think we need to reframe failure as our friend. It's rocket fuel. And again, there's so many ways to do this. So I don't know if you know, but the most successful companies in the world fail the most. So IBM, Amazon, Apple, Google fail all the time. They are constantly releasing new services, new products that fail, but they know that's the price of progress. Now, pharmaceutical companies, the vast majority of what they do is failures. The most successful venture capital companies have the most failed investments. These are people meant to be geniuses. These are people who some young kid from China has come in and persuaded them to invest $5 million, and it fails. Because nothing comes with guarantees. And so I think failure is a gift. It's a gift. Nelson Mandela said, "I either win or I learn."
But you just mentioned all these big companies and high achievers and how they failed, all right? But do you think high achievers, do you think they actually think bigger or they act sooner? All right? Because they fail and then they strategize and then come back again. So do you think they think bigger or they act sooner? What do you
I think both. I think they go together. I think there's so many people, and we all know these people, especially if you come from a poor background. There's so many people who could have been successful if only I'd had that chance. I could have been successful if I'd only got into that team or whatever, And it breaks my heart because they're giving themselves a narrative that it's the world to blame, not them, And the big companies just go, well, let's give it a go. If I go to them with a stupid idea, they say, well, we're not going to do that. But if I go to them and they go, yeah, that might work, and it will cost us £250,000 to do it, or £1 million to do it, and we're worth 500 billion. Yeah, give it a go. See what happens, And I think that's a brilliant mindset. And if you take that down to our level, do you want to come and play bowls on Sunday, Felix? I don't want to play bowls. I want to enjoy bowls. Well, look, are you busy Sunday? No. Well, come and play bowls. And you say, all right, so I'll risk a morning. And then I go, oh, bowls is the most fun I've had in months, and we can do that with life. We can do that without, and companies need to do it. Companies ought to always be trying out new initiatives, and they don't have to be radical. Just, it can be changing the offering of teas and coffees in the kitchen station. Seriously, they should constantly be saying, how can we do little upgrades? Or what's a big initiative? Or what's something that would differentiate us from everyone else? Can we give that a go? What would it take to invest in that? And companies are stunningly conservative, and that and schools are conservative, and society is conservative, and all of it is failure. Plays into risk aversion, which I think is the most powerful cognitive bias. And failure, we have to laugh in the face of failure. We have to absolutely. The Spartan king, I can't remember his name all of a sudden, but he said that someone said, "What's the defining quality you look for in your soldiers?" And he said, "Contempt for death." And I say to people, have contempt for failure. Have contempt for it. You're gonna fail, so what? So, I've burnt mills. I've burnt mills. I sold my first company. A month later, it would have been worth £1. It was on the eve of the credit crunch. I sold it knowing the credit crunch was coming, which is the only intelligent economic insight I've ever had in my life. I sold my company because I knew the credit crunch was coming. If the company had waited a month, I would have sold it for £1. You know, and that would have been called a failure. And I would have thought, no, well, you know, how is one a success, one a failure? I mean, just, you know, and I think we are too quick to call things successes, and we're too quick to call things failures. And in fact, I always said to my girls, I've got 2 wonderful girls, and I always said, failure is not trying. If you get in the race, you're already a winner. You're already a winner. But they were at a school where there was a beautiful little lad. He was adopted. He came from a drug-dependent mother, and so he had stunted growth. And he had red hair and thick glasses. He was like a cliche of a little sort of cartoon character of a little put upon boy. And his mum, who was she was a warrior. His mum would make him get in the school sports day. She'd make him do all the activities, especially the 50 meters. And he'd be at the line saying, "I don't want to do it. I don't want to." She says, "You're doing it. You're doing it." And he would run in that race. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because I watched it every year. He would come in that race. He didn't just lose. He lost by, you could have run another race while he was doing it, you know? He lost his little legs. He ran for his life. And I'm telling you now, every parent cheered him. We forgot our kids were in the race. My kids would run up and say, Dad, I came first. And I'd say, yeah, well, hang on, I'm just watching the race. Because and now you can call that failure. You can say he came last. Or you can say God loves a trier.
Yeah.
You know, you can say he got in the ring, you know? And that, how can you call that a failure? You know, we call too many things a failure. You know, we're too quick to say it. And I think we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate that learning curve.
Yeah, I agree. But because of time, all right, we need to wrap it up. If there's anyone listening today and the person wants to start thinking bigger, all right, what's that one action you think the person needs to do to start thinking bigger?
Well, if we really want to accelerate it, read a book.
Read a book.
I mean, it used to be quite trendy.
But
It used to
which
be quite
book?
fashionable reading books.
But which book? That's the thing.
To be well, anything really. I mean, pick up a. I mean, just you go into the sort of business. Don't do self-help. I mean, I think I'm a bit suspicious of most of that. But go and read. Go into the sort of the business and contemporary affairs, current affairs section of foils or Waterstones. Go into a bookshop and have a browse. Don't go on. Amazon's fine, but I'm just saying, have a browse. You'll find a book that's easily digestible, and just go, yeah, all right, I want to read up on that. I want to read up on, I don't know, how the rich have a grip on the world, and then we're never going to get back to equality ever again. Read a book on that. Or watch a YouTube lecture. I mean, YouTube has got millions of hours of amazing lectures from professors and lecturers from all over the world, and don't just choose something safe. Go to go to an African university. Google it and then just see what lectures they've got and get a totally different perspective on the world. See them talk about imperialism. Don't listen to the British. Listen to an African professor talk about imperialism. That will shake up your worldview, and it will. I listen. I deliberately try and I reckon maybe 20% of my time I go onto YouTube, and I love YouTube. I use it every day. And I was listening to a Chinese historian, professor of history this week, talking about what the state of the world from China's perspective. Totally at odds with what we hear. Totally at odds. And what you need to do is challenge your thinking.
Yeah.
So you want different ideas, and that can be YouTube. It can be a book. And like I said,
podcast.
Well, podcast, they're brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, this conversation hopefully might have stimulated someone to go, I'm going to pick up a book or go back to university or I mean, I put out content, felixriley.com. I put out content where I'm constantly just trying to sort of talk about cognitive biases or different ideas, but every single day, I think there must be about, no less than 10 people who I learn from every day. It might be a YouTube short, it might be a story online. It might be a proper YouTube video or something. Or I read every day, and I constantly want that information. You've got to challenge the status quo, haven't you?
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. But you did mention that you put out content every day. So if there are listeners who want to connect with you and learn more about your work, where can they do that?
felixriley.com.
Okay.
There's lots of information about there, and if I'm giving talks, I always mention it on LinkedIn. So come connect with me on LinkedIn. It's lovely. Let's have a conversation.
So they can connect with you on LinkedIn or felixriley.com.
Yeah, felixriley.com or on LinkedIn, and it's a pleasure. And I always advertise when I'm giving a talk anywhere, and people can invite me. I get invited to, and there's lots of talks I give for free. I mean, I don't want to advertise that fact, but I'm not going to charge a state school. I'm not going to charge a hospital. Yeah. I mean, I'm passionate about this. I'm so passionate. Law firms should pretend to be schools. They should say, "Well, we're just an inner city school, Felix. Come and give us a free talk."
Yeah.
I'd realise halfway through. Get in touch. I mean, honestly, don't hesitate to get in touch.
All right, no worries. But thank you so much, Felix, because this is all the time we have for this week. And I really, really enjoyed that talk. And I hope anybody who listens to this understand that it's important for us to start thinking bigger and expand our brains, become curious, and not just narrow our mindset. Be open minded and be curious out there to listen to other ideas as well. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time and I hope you had fun as well.
Yeah, I did.
We'll do this again.
Yeah, would love to.
All right, definitely. Thank you.